Well, by now, the violent crime issue in Kansas City and in major American cities across the country has unfortunately spiraled out of control. But there's a major success story right here in our backyard that just frankly doesn't get enough attention. And that's on the other side of the state line in KCK, where in 2020, they had 58 homicides that year. Last year, they got the number down to 37. And right now, year to date, there are still 19 too many, but only 19 homicides in Kansas City, Kansas. The guy who's been running the operation there for the better part of almost 2.5 years now, Karl Oakman, joins us in studio. Chief, good morning.
Good morning, Pete.
Thanks for coming in. So many people may know you from your time in KCMO. Really, you got an enormous amount of face time, well-deserved in 2020 when all the craziness was happening. You became one of the key spokespersons for the department. And then you took the KCK chief job over 2 years ago now. So how did that process come about for you, for people that don't know that story, and, leading that department here for the last 2.5 years?
Yeah, well, the opportunity came. I was about a little over 29 years at KCMO. I was born and raised in KCK. And, it's a long story, but, I grew up in poverty, lost both of my parents by the time I was 11. And that community through, other relatives, but that community really took care of me and kept me out of trouble, never went to jail, never got involved in crime and that kind of thing. So when that opportunity came up, I was like, this is an opportunity for me to give back to my hometown.
Now, that's amazing. I just want to, your story. What led you into law enforcement after losing your parents at such a young age?
Well, surprisingly, a police officer, when I was about 5, I never forget, he would come around in our neighborhood. And you gotta realize this. This is like 1975. Mm-hmm. And this is, our neighborhood was predominantly African-American. This was a white police officer who would come in KCK in our neighborhood, and he would take the time and really talk to the kids, give us coloring books, making sure we were doing what we were supposed to at school. And it really had an impact on me. And I'll never forget, I was probably about 6 or 7. There was a shooting up the street. So the detective came and was talking. We were out. We saw the whole thing. We were the detective was pretty nice. But
how old are you at the time?
I'm probably 6.
Oh, wow.
And the detective was, he was nice enough, but really wasn't, we were like, we didn't know. We were kind of afraid. So, and I only know him by Officer Bill, and I've been trying to find this guy.
Oh, have you?
But so he comes over. And, man, I tell you, we told him the car, the make, the color. We were telling him so much information. He was like, that's enough. I don't need any more. But when you look at that globally, mm-hmm. That's important when you get those relationships. And that's some of the stuff we've seen in KCK with our community really giving us information through TIPS hotline. That's why as of August this year, we had a 100% clearance rate, which was the first time that late in the year that clearance rate has ever been that high in KCK. We've since had 2 homicides, so it's about 89% now, but we're anticipating charges. But that's important when you talk about me growing up and having that relationship with the police early on.
So you take this job 2.5 years ago in KCK. People in the region know you very well in the law enforcement community. What's the first thing you do, knowing what needs to happen to have success on this stuff and in this job? What are the first things that you do when you take that job?
Well, the first thing, you look at your experience. I had over 29 years in KCMO. Mm-hmm. Been every rank, officer, detective, sergeant, captain, major, deputy chief. That's very important. So I understand the issues at every rank and how you fit into the organization.
Yeah.
So I took that experience with researching KCK Police Department. So I knew the good, great community, supportive elected officials, great officers. And then I looked at the bad. Violent crime was one of the things, violent crime and just that perception in general. And then I looked at the ugly. And the ugly was, the information of the historical corruption, some of which was perception, some depending on what you want to call it. Some can say that's reality. But I knew regardless, I had to deal with it as the police chief. So even, discussing this with my wife, who really is a big support. We've been married 30 years.
God bless you.
And she's been through all this. So, we sat down and started talking about, because you got to include the family if you're going to move. So I knew I had to develop a plan before I took that job to address the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I developed a strategic plan with 8 objectives to address those issues.
Wow. Now, in terms of, working with, everyone thinks about violent crime, and Karl Oakman's joining us, KCK police chief. You guys are one part of it. You got to have a prosecutor's willing to do the job. You got to have the right support system in place. How did you work your way through that at a time when, let's be honest, there was still a lot of mistrust between law enforcement and prosecutors, especially in urban communities?
Well, I think, and it was, I wouldn't say when you talk about being a police chief fair or unfair, I think I had an advantage coming from KCK, understanding. I still had family, still had friends. So I really wanted the community to know this is not just a job. I'm here to make this city better, and I want to work with whoever I need to work with, but at the same time understanding that as the police department, we have responsibilities, and I wanted them to understand, hey, we're not going to throw everything into community engagement and not do any enforcement. There's a balance because there are individuals that need to go to jail, period. You have a lot of sociologists that always say, hey, you can't arrest your way out of this problem. Yes, you can. You have to arrest the right people and keep them in jail. So that was one of the message, even with the elected officials, all supportive.
But they were supportive.
They were supportive because they didn't have their own agenda. They wanted KCK to be the best city it possibly could. And I knew kind of the history with the DA, and I knew him. So that helped when we started our relationship. And even Mark could tell you this. Our first meeting, we set the boundary clear. I'm the police chief. You're the prosecutor. When I start trying to be the prosecutor and he starts trying to be the police chief, that's when we have problems. And if we have problems, the troops have problems, the community has problems.
Karl Oakman is the police chief in Kansas City, Kansas. Took over that job 2.5 years ago. Their homicides have come down tremendously the last couple of years. They had 58 in 2020. And this year, year to date, they have 19. Chief, how are you doing when it comes to numbers in the police department? I know every department's struggling. Where are you guys at right now?
Well, I mean, we're struggling, but we have seen some hope in our recruiting and hiring. Our total right now, our total authorized strength is 381.
Okay,
and we've been hovering for the last 2 years in between 325 and 345. Right now, we're about 330-ish. We got some in the academy. So
okay. So, I mean, that's, you're down about 45, 50 officers maybe, give or take. And, you're still pulling these numbers. So is that a testament to the folks that you have, the guys and gals that you have there on staff doing the good work despite being down maybe 10%?
Yeah, I mean, we have great detectives, great officers, and, I'm blessed with some great commanders that we're able to really discuss what direction we need to go. And we always try to use that balance on officers and community. And they're doing a great job. But, as a leader, I always try to stay away from the, we're down this many because, I run the organization and it's my job to do more with less. But hopefully we will get more, but I think we can't really use that as an excuse because the community demands better.
And I got to imagine, too, you have these numbers come down. It becomes a more attractive job to people, right? I mean, that's just got to come. The more that you've got a good relationship with the prosecutor's office, the more you guys bring these violent crime numbers down, that makes the job more appealing to a lot of folks.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great job. And, as we talked a little off air, my son's a police officer. So I didn't discourage him. And, me and my wife are so proud of him.
That's great. Karl Oakman's on KCMO. I do want to talk a little bit about the other side of the state line, but just take me through to your fentanyl plan. You were telling me about this. We know it's a problem all over the country right now, and that is fentanyl overdoses, how it's impacting poor communities, rich communities, everybody in between. So what are you guys doing on the fentanyl side that's having success?
Well, we have a very unique way of responding, and we started this in late 2021 as we were seeing our fentanyl numbers skyrocket. What we do in KCK, any fentanyl-related overdose, whether the individual survive or not, a detective is required to respond on that scene and start an investigation. And that investigation has led us back to dealers, suppliers, and we've done so far this year, we've done 49 search warrants or vehicle takedowns regarding fentanyl and recovered about 370,000 pills, 50 pounds of powder fentanyl, and we've also recovered in these search warrants over about 240 illegal firearms, as well as I call it the triplets. What we see at these search warrants are fentanyl, marijuana, and methamphetamine. All three run together when we hit these houses on this fentanyl. And something else unique through the help of the DA in Wyandotte County, we've also submitted 19 cases or charged 19 people, some of them are duplicates, in overdose death charges.
Wow.
So it's helped us with our violent crime because we've identified these are the same people that were selling crack, meth, involved in robberies, shootings. And so we kind of got them on the run, and we're going to keep them on the run.
That's great. Now, on the other side of the state line, you know Kansas City, Missouri well. You spent almost 30 years in the department. You really became a household name for many during 2020, during all the chaos that was happening at that time. You were a spokesperson for the department, and you were very much out there in the media and in the public. You see what's going on right now there. They are approaching 2020 numbers, and most cities are coming down the last couple of years. I got to imagine that still ties back to you being on the front lines in 2020 and how I don't think the city's recovered from that point in time. What would you say?
No, I don't think so. I was in the middle of that, and I can tell you I had been on at that time, almost 30 years. Mm-hmm. I was on that front line, and I saw some of the abuse some of the younger officers were taking. I actually moved them off the line and took their place. And I had people say stuff to me that I hadn't heard in 30 years of being in law enforcement. And I think what has happened is you have to have community trust, but you also have to have the police trusting the community they serve. And right now, this is just my observation, and talking to a whole lot of officers there, I think that trust for the community is not there. And I think that's one area that I think through community, all of that needs to be built back up to pre-2020.
Because it's a two-way street, right?
Yes,
I mean, right now it seems like, communities are demanding trust from law enforcement, but law enforcement has to also trust the people they're serving. And it sounds like that's maybe the way that still is getting lost in the conversation in some respects.
Yes, and and some people disagree with that, but unfortunately, that's kind of a fact of what we're seeing. So that's something that at KCK I really work on and make sure that we're doing action and not a lot of talking. That's the one thing. Even when I brought in the commanders on my first day, I said, "Hey, the days of sitting around talking and creating a committee to create the next committee is over with. We need to be on the ground, making a difference in the people's lives that we're paid to serve."
And how'd you do that? I mean, you went into the communities maybe where there was some mistrust. Maybe it wasn't KCMO levels, but what did you do? Because you got Hispanic communities there in KCK. I mean, you have quite a blend of different communities there.
Well, one thing we did in the Hispanic community is we created a Hispanic community liaison. This was a captain that grew up in KCK, knew the neighborhoods, knew the people, and really because some of these neighborhoods were being overrun and terrorized by these gangs. And through building that relationship and that trust, now those community members are calling us and we're pretty much running them out of those neighborhoods. And it's based on that relationship and then those community members really wanting to be a part of the problem through action, not sitting on committees and talking, but actually doing something.
Wow. Well, you guys are doing great work, and we appreciate you coming down to the studios here at KCMO and joining us, Karl Oakman. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Good stuff. That is the police chief for KCK, Karl Oakman, in studio. Certainly won't be our last conversation on KCMO Talk Radio, 710 AM and 103.7 FM. Plus, of course, you can stream us on the KCMO Talk Radio app.